Welcome back to the Napoleonic War series from Epic History TV. I will be checking out every single Napoleonic Wars video from Epic History TV, and that includes the Marshal series where he goes into every single marshal that Napoleon had and details a little biography about them. And one thing I'm not sure about is maybe I should check that video out first, but I think there might be some spoilers in that one for what happens during the Napoleonic Wars here. But I hope you're enjoying it so far. Again, as I've said before, this isn't a topic in history that I really know too much about. So most of my learning is actually coming from these videos. So the last time we left off, it was in 1807. Napoleon had knocked out Russia, and he was the master of Europe. You saw the map, right? Most of Europe was under his control or under his influence in some sort of way. Russia's in the continental system, and it's finally time to focus on the true enemy of the French, Britain. However, before then, he invades Portugal, and this leads to, as the title of the video is, Napoleon's greatest blunder. The Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal together. 1808. Let's get into it.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration.
Also, thank you to people who said History March is a different channel. I'll do some videos of theirs as well.
Supported by our sponsor, Osprey Publishing. In the autumn of 1807, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte dominated Europe.
Look at that.
He had humbled Austria and Prussia and sealed an alliance with Russia. Of the major powers, only Britain still defied him, safe from invasion thanks to its powerful navy. Napoleon,
a theme in British history, if I might add,
had ordered all territory controlled by France or its allies to stop trading with Britain, the so-called Continental System, or blockade, designed to wreck Britain's economy and force its government to make peace. But neutral Portugal had continued to trade with its historic ally, Britain. So Napoleon sent an army under General Junot to occupy the country and force it into line. The invasion was supported by France's ally, Spain, though privately Napoleon held Spain's rulers in contempt.
Yes.
The Bourbon royal family was decadent and corrupt. The king and crown prince loathed each other, while the country was effectively run by Chief Minister Manuel Godoy, the Queen's lover. Spain, Napoleon concluded, was backwards, militarily weak and incompetently governed, and he devised a plan to seize control of the country.
Oh, perfect timing, because I'm actually going to Spain this weekend. I'm actually going to Barcelona this weekend, and before I'm up to that, I'm going to do a Geography Now video on Spain. That one will be coming up soon. I'm bringing you a remedy.
In the spring of 1808,
yeah, that's not a good way to make friends, eh?
under the pretext of guarding Spain against the British, French troops took up strategic positions around the country. The Spanish people saw the French military presence as the latest in a long line of humiliations, and held Chief Minister Manuel Godoy responsible. There were riots at the palace of Aranjuez. Godoy was nearly lynched. Napoleon invited the Spanish royal family and Godoy to take refuge in the French city of Bayonne, and sent Marshal Murat and 50,000 troops to restore order in Madrid.
Yep. Atrocities commence.
But on the 2nd of May 1808, the people of Madrid rose up against Murat's soldiers. It became known as the Dos de Mayo Uprising, immortalized by the artist Francisco Goya. This scene shows Mamelukes of Napoleon's Imperial Guard attacked by the citizens of Madrid. 100 soldiers were killed. The French responded ruthlessly, shooting down dozens in the streets.
Yep.
And executing more than 100 by firing squad. Meanwhile, in Bayonne, Napoleon forced King Carlos to abdicate and bestowed the title King of Spain on his own brother, Joseph.
We're seeing a running family here. So the King of Westphalia is one of Napoleon's family members. The King of Spain is now one of Napoleon's family members. And I believe one of the kings there in Italy is also one of Napoleon's family members. Running theme here, eh? Also important to note at this point, so the French, although, again, it's more complicated than this though, although they're Catholic, yes, but religion plays less of a role in Napoleon's regime than other previous French regimes, and Spain is hyper-Catholic, like probably one of the most Catholic nations on earth at this point. And so that's also a very important point to remember too. That I don't know if it's going to be brought up in this video, but there is that religious tension as well that's important to note for this time.
That summer, as Napoleon forced a new modernizing constitution on Spain, and his brother Joseph entered Madrid as its new king, the Spanish reacted with fury.
Yep.
The French weren't just arrogant foreigners trampling on their national honor. They were godless atheists who, during the French Revolution, had rejected the Pope and Catholic Church.
As I said,
Napoleon, priest,
I swear I haven't seen this video before.
was
I
the
promise.
very Antichrist himself.
Yep.
Revolts erupted across the country. The Spanish army was joined by militias and partisans who attacked French troops and killed collaborators. French soldiers carried out savage reprisals. No mercy was shown.
Yep.
The countless atrocities horrified Francisco Goya and led to his famous Disasters of War series.
And not only that, so this is also fueling anti-Napoleon sentiments in other parts of the world. Particularly Britain is taking this and exploiting this to create propaganda against Napoleon, right? And so people, although obviously the methods of communication are different, there are people that are all over the world that are seeing these tragedies take place, and it's affecting the legitimacy of the regime.
At first, it seemed the French would easily put down the revolt. Girona, Valencia, and Zaragoza were besieged by French troops, while the Spanish army of Galicia was routed by Marshal Bessières at the Battle of Medina del Rio Seco. But 8 days later, as General Dupont and 3 French divisions withdrew from Córdoba, slowed down by wagons piled high with loot, they were surrounded at Bailén by General Castaños' army of Andalusia and forced to surrender. The Spanish took 18,000 French prisoners, about half of whom later died of starvation.
Yikes.
Bailén was a humiliation for France, her first major defeat since Napoleon became emperor. France's enemies across Europe were delighted. Napoleon was incandescent with fury. The situation went from bad to worse. The Portuguese joined the revolt, while fierce Spanish resistance forced the French to abandon the sieges of Valencia, Girona, and Zaragoza. Spain's new king, Joseph Bonaparte, was even forced to flee the capital.
Again, how embarrassing is this? And as he's about to say, the Brits are going to take full advantage of this, right? Don't stop your enemy when he's making a mistake. So the anti-Napoleon forces in the world are loving this.
British assisted the revolt, which the Spanish now called a War of Independence, by shipping weapons to Spain using the Royal Navy.
Yep.
On the 1st of August, a small British army commanded by Sir Arthur Wellesley landed in Portugal to aid their revolt. On the 17th of August, he beat a small French force at Rolissa. Then, 4 days later, beat Junot's main army at the Battle of Vimero. But Wellesley's newly arrived superior, Sir Hugh Dalrymple, then agreed to repatriate Junot and his army to France, with all their arms and plunder, using British ships. In Britain, the generous terms were seen as a disgrace and scandal.
Really?
A subsequent inquiry exonerated Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, but Dalrymple never held command again.
I was going to say, that seems very, very generous given the time. I'd never heard of that before. They just Let them ferry across? Wow, okay.
Napoleon decided the only way to sort out the situation in Spain
was to go there himself.
He assembled 130,000 reinforcements, including many of his best troops, and on the 7th of November, led a second invasion of Spain. Most Spanish troops were inexperienced, were often badly equipped and led, and their armies had no coherent strategy. They were no match for the Grande Armée, which burst across the Ebro River and inflicted heavy defeats on the Spanish at Burgos and Tudela. At Tudela, Marshal Lannes' Third Corps avenged the defeat at Bailén by smashing the army of General Castaños, sending it fleeing in 2 directions. Napoleon pushed on rapidly. North of Madrid, 8,000 Spanish held the mountain pass at Somosierra. Napoleon, impatient to break through to the capital, ordered forward the Polish Light Horse of the Guard. In an attack of almost suicidal bravery, they charged the Spanish guns head-on and enabled the French to take the pass.
Oh, man.
4 days
cavalry.
later,
Oof.
after Napoleon threatened to obliterate the city, Madrid opened its gates to his army. Unaware of the disaster engulfing Spanish forces, a 20,000-strong British army, commanded by Sir John Moore, had just arrived in Salamanca after a 300-mile march from Lisbon, with another smaller force en route from Coruña.
I don't think this will be the last we'll hear of Sir John Moore.
The British army was inexperienced, but in contrast to most Spanish forces, it was well-trained, organized, and led. As news reached Moore of the Spanish collapse, he nevertheless planned to divert French forces by attacking Marshal Soult's isolated Second Corps and threatening Napoleon's communications to Burgos and France. At Sahagun on the 21st of December, the British 15th Hussars advanced overnight through winter frost and made a dawn attack on a French cavalry brigade, routing it in one great charge. But as Moore prepared a full-scale attack on Soult's corps, he received news that Napoleon was advancing rapidly towards him with his main army from Madrid.
He's got the best quotes. Come on.
While 2 French corps under Marshal Lannes began a second bloody siege of Zaragoza, Napoleon saw a chance to get to grips with the British at last. Intending to trap Moore between his own forces and Soult's Second Corps, he force-marched his troops over the icy Guadarrama Pass in the midst of a blizzard. Moore, facing odds of more than 2 to 1, immediately ordered a retreat, planning to march 250 miles to the coast, where his army could be evacuated by the Royal Navy. For both sides, the race to the sea was an exhausting slog through mountains, mud, and bitter cold.
Fighting the way down there too.
Many fell by the wayside as British discipline collapsed, leading to looting and drunkenness, except among the rearguard, which fought several skillful delaying actions and kept the French at bay. Soldiers of Britain's elite 95th Rifles were prominent in these skirmishes. This specialized light infantry regiment wore green uniforms for better concealment and were one of the few units on any side armed with rifles. Unlike the standard smoothbore musket, rifles had spiral grooves in the barrel that spun the bullet as it was fired, making them slower to load, but much more accurate. In one legendary incident during Moore's retreat at Cacabelos, rifleman Tom Plunkett picked out and shot dead a French general at 400 yards.
Wow.
Some say further. thanks to the skill of the rear guard.
See, that's one thing too. So why was the red coat so prominent for so long? If this regiment already is wearing green coats for better concealment, why did they not adapt that to the rest of the British Army, or tan coats for their regiments in Africa? Right? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there about that, but I'm kind of curious why.
And the desperate pace of the retreat, the British kept one step ahead of the French. On New Year's Eve, Napoleon received grave news from Paris. Rumours of plots, and Austria mobilizing once more for war. The Emperor immediately left for France, taking many of his best troops with him, and entrusted Marshal Soult and Second Corps with finishing off the British.
And again, this is the issue that's going to pop up for Napoleon time and time and time again, is that he cannot be everywhere at once. Right? And so as the Spanish front never quite solidifies, and there's always conflict going on here, this is really the beginning of the downfall for Napoleon, when eventually Austria will go to war again, when he goes to war with Russia. Spain is constantly a thorn in his side that never ceases past this point. Spain is never in a position where it's no longer threatening France in some sort of way. It always is from this point onwards.
The pursuit continued, but on the 11th of January 1809, Moore's ragged army reached Corunna. For Sir John Moore's exhausted army, the Spanish port meant supplies, rest, and the prospect of rescue. But few ships were there to meet them on the 11th. Fortunately, the British had been able to blow up bridges behind them to delay Marshal Soult's advance. And 3 days later, on the 14th of January, the naval transports arrived, allowing Moore to begin embarking his cavalry and artillery. But the very next day, Soult's army appeared on the hills south of Corunna, taking up positions on the heights of Peñasquedo, where he sighted his main battery of cannon.
I can't imagine these troops the ones that have to turn back and go fight after they're already near the town that's going to rescue them.
Half of Moore's army deployed in a defensive line 2 miles south of the city, with 2 divisions held back to protect his right flank. Both armies were roughly 16,000 strong. The French had 4 regiments of dragoons, while the British cavalry was already aboard ship. But the broken terrain of walls, hedges, and olive trees made it a battlefield ill-suited to cavalry. Soult's plan was to attack the British right flank and trap Moore's army against the sea. Around 2 p.m, the French artillery opened fire. Then Mermet's infantry division advanced, supported by Lahoussaye's dragoons on his left. Moore had been unsure if Soult would attack, and had just ordered Paget's division to begin embarkation. Now he hurriedly cancelled that order, ordering Paget instead to bring up his men to reinforce his open flank, and Fraser's division to take up position on the heights of Santa Margarita. The French advanced through hedges and over walls, with heavy firing from skirmishers on both sides. Then the British counterattacked. The 42nd Highlanders and 50th Foot charged into the village of Elvina and drove the French out. But in confused fighting, they in turn were soon pushed back to their own lines. Sir John Moore was close to the front line, observing developments, urging on officers and men. But as he ordered up the Guards Brigade to reinforce the line, he was hit in the shoulder by a cannonball. He remained conscious, but it was obvious the wound was fatal, and he was carried back to the city.
Oh, the way he said that was sort of kind of funny.
Soult sent forward Merle's division to...
Okay, I think like 10 minutes ago, I thought that this was a more famous... Okay, I said about 10 minutes ago, this won't be the last we'll hear from him. Apparently that would be the last we hear from him. Okay, I think I got my British generals mixed up.
Support the attack on Elvina. Scottish General Sir John Hope had taken over command of the British army from the dying Moore, and he ordered forward 2 battalions of infantry to meet the French attack. Paget's division, led by skirmishers of the 95th Rifles, arrived to shore up the British right flank. The terrain was so bad for horses that French dragoons chose to dismount and fight on foot, but were slowly pushed back by the British. Paget's advance threatened the flank of Mermet's attack on Elvina, and he too was forced to withdraw, while an attack on the right by Delaborde's infantry secured a foothold in the village of Piedra Longa, but got bogged down in heavy skirmishing. Around 6 p.m, dusk fell, and firing died out across the battlefield. News that the British line had held reached Moore shortly before he died in Coruña, around 8 p.m. That night, the British lit campfires and posted sentries, then silently withdrew to Coruña to begin embarkation. The next morning, the French found the enemy positions abandoned, but they were slow to take advantage. It wasn't until noon that they were able to bring up 6 cannon and get them into position overlooking the Bay of Coruña.
Why so late?
The British had almost completed their evacuation by the time the French guns opened fire.
Yeah, exactly.
In a hurried departure, a few British transports ran aground, and 2 were set on fire, but overall, losses were light. A small Spanish garrison held Coruña, waiting until the British fleet had escaped to sea, before surrendering. Whether Moore's retreat to Coruña was a British disaster or miraculous escape is still debated.
Who sees that as a disaster? I mean, that is a completely miraculous victory, no? Like a completely miraculous escape if you don't want to call it a victory. Who would say that is a disaster? I mean, what could you have done? The French failed their objective, which was to cut off the British and completely annihilate them. What could they really have done?
And did he abandon Spain in its hour of need? Or draw off Napoleon's main force, buying time for others?
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Either way, Britain's only army had been saved.
I'm kind of curious actually what you think. Let me know in the comment section below. Put a timestamp. That's always the easiest thing too. Like when people put a timestamp and say, this is what I think about that, it makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, please do that because I'm curious what you think, because I think he didn't really abandon Spain in its time of need. The amount of forces that he pushed back obviously delayed it. And to me, it seems like sort of a miraculous escape, really, more than anything. But like I said, let me know what you think down below.
And would return to fight another day, while Napoleon now faced the prospect of a long war on the Iberian Peninsula and renewed conflict with Austria, a war on 2 fronts that would challenge his empire like never before.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the war in Spain is really considered one of the first guerrilla wars of all time, too. Guerrilla meaning, obviously, warfare that is done in a way where it's not direct confrontational frontline warfare, but rather there are groups of sometimes even civilians that conduct sabotage, and exactly, you know what guerrilla warfare is. So, yeah, I think this was one of the first cases of it. I might be wrong on that, though.
Napoleon had blundered in Spain.
Yeah,
but it was years before the scale of his mistake was evident. Then he would say, "I embarked pretty badly on this affair, I admit it. The immorality showed too obviously. The injustice was too cynical. The whole of it remains very ugly."
That it
If you'd like
does.
to learn more about the...
And with that, I actually might want to check out one of these books one of these days because these look really, really cool. Anyways, though, thank you very much for joining me on this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be going to Spain this weekend, as I said. So, Geography Now. I'll probably post that one first, actually. Then you'll see that one after. So, by the time you see this video, the Geography Now episode will already be out. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope you found it interesting. The next one we'll be checking out is 1809 to 1811, Spain's Ulcer. I believe that's the title of the video. And this is sort of the beginning of the end, gents. We've seen the meteoric rise, and let's see the slow downfall of Napoleon. Albeit, there will obviously be some brilliant victories in between there. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. All the best. See you in the next video.